Kindness is the one thing that can change everything, even the hardest hearts. Emma whispered to herself as she watched the little boy. His cheeks stained with tears, wiped them away as he took the fried rice from her. It wasn't much, but for him it was everything. And for her it was just another day. Little did she know, that simple act of kindness would change her life forever. Emma stood in the park, a cool breeze brushing through her brown hair, her heart heavy with the weight of a long day. She had just finished working an extra shift at the local diner to make ends meet, and now with her young son Jack in tow, she was trying to find a moment of peace. The park was quiet, with just the sound of birds in the trees and the distant hum of the city. As she sat on a bench, she couldn't help but notice the young boy sitting alone on the other side of the park. His clothes were ragged. He looked like he hadn't eaten in days. Her heart ached as she watched him, and despite her own exhaustion, she walked over. "Hey there," she said gently, offering him a warm smile. The boy didn't respond, but she could see the hunger in his eyes. Without a second thought, Emma pulled the small takeout container of fried rice from her bag and held it out to him. "I'm not sure if it's much, but it's all I've got," she said, her voice kind. The boy hesitated for a moment before reaching out with trembling hands, taking the food from her. As he began to eat, his eyes widened and for the first time he smiled. The small, simple act was nothing extraordinary in her eyes, but to him it was everything. She smiled watching him as he devoured the meal, knowing that in that moment, she had made a small difference. Unbeknownst to Emma, her act of kindness didn't go unnoticed. Nathan Grant, a successful tech mogul with a reputation for his cold, businesslike demeanor, had been passing through the park on a run. When he saw her, he was struck by the warmth in her actions, something rare in a world so driven by ambition and success. He had always been taught to keep his distance from strangers, but Emma's compassion left him questioning his own worldview. He paused, watching her interact with the boy. Something about her genuine kindness resonated deeply with him. Nathan had everything: money, power, fame. Yet there was a hollowness that had slowly crept into his life. He had grown tired of his wealth and the constant chase for more. Standing there, he realized that perhaps what he was missing wasn't another deal, but the simple, genuine connections that came from small acts of kindness. Nathan approached slowly, unsure of what to say, but Emma turned to him with a smile, as if she had known he was watching the whole time. "I'm Nathan," he introduced himself, his voice softer than usual. Emma, not expecting anyone to interrupt her quiet moment, responded with a polite nod. "That's a kind thing you did," Nathan continued, his voice steady but full of admiration. Emma shrugged, looking back at the boy, who was now finished and smiling. "Just doing what I can," she said, though in her heart, she was surprised that someone like him would notice. Nathan took a moment to think, the wheels in his mind turning. He had never been one to believe in fate, but something about Emma's act of kindness made him feel like this moment was meant to be. Without warning, he made a decision. "I have a proposal for you," Nathan said, his eyes locking onto hers. "I know this might sound strange, but I want to offer you a job at my company. You've shown more heart than most of the people I work with. I think you do well in a place where kindness still matters." Emma's eyes widened in disbelief. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything right now," Nathan smiled. "Just think about it. You've got a lot more to offer than you realize." As Emma stood there, processing his words, she couldn't help but feel the weight of her circumstances shifting. A new chapter was beginning, one that she had never imagined. It all started with a simple meal shared with a hungry child. Emma didn't sleep much that night, and when she did, her dreams felt scattered, unfinished, like pages of a story she was not ready to read. The small apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the steady breathing of her son asleep in the next room. She lay on her side, staring at the faint crack in the ceiling above her bed, replaying the moment in the park again and again. A stranger with a tailored suit and a calm voice had stepped into her ordinary life and offered something that didn't belong there. Opportunity. It sounded too large, too clean, too distant from the reality she knew. When morning came, it didn't bring clarity. It only brought routine. Emma moved through it the way she always did. She made breakfast with what she had left. 2 eggs. Half a slice of bread. She made it stretch. Jack sat at the small table, swinging his legs, watching her with quiet curiosity. "Mom," he said between bites, "are you okay?" Emma forced a soft smile and nodded. "Just thinking," she replied. He tilted his head slightly, studying her the way children do when they sense something is different but can't name it. "About the man?" he asked. The question caught her off guard. She turned, leaning against the counter. "What man?" Jack shrugged. "The one who looked like he owns everything." Emma let out a small breath, almost a laugh. "I don't know if he owns everything," she said. "But he definitely lives in a different world." Jack nodded as if that made perfect sense. "He seemed nice," he added. Emma paused. That was the part she couldn't dismiss. He had been calm, respectful, not like the kind of people she had learned to be careful around. Still, nice didn't always mean safe. And opportunity didn't always mean stability. After dropping Jack off at school, Emma walked the long way home. It was just under a mile. But she needed the time. The air was cool. The city was already awake. People moving with purpose she didn't feel yet. She passed storefronts, buses, and construction sites, all of it familiar, all of it grounded. This was her world. Predictable. Manageable. Hard. But honest. By the time she reached her building, her phone buzzed in her hand. She knew who it was before she looked. The message was simple. "I meant what I said. No pressure. Just a conversation." Emma stared at the screen longer than she expected. There was no urgency in his words. No demand. That made it harder to refuse. Inside her apartment, she placed her bag on the chair and sat down slowly. The silence pressed in again. But this time it felt different. Not heavy. Not empty. Just waiting. She thought about the boy in the park. The way he had smiled after one warm meal. She hadn't helped him because she expected anything in return. She had done it because it felt right. Simple. Clear. Now she was standing on the other side of that moment, and nothing felt simple anymore. She picked up her phone again, her thumb hovering over the screen. This was not just about a job. It was about stepping into something unknown. Something that could change everything. Or take it away. Emma closed her eyes for a brief second, then opened them with quiet resolve. She typed slowly, carefully. "I will meet you. Just to talk." She read it once. Then she pressed send. The message disappeared. But the decision stayed. And for the first time in a long while, Emma realized she was not just reacting to life. She was choosing what came next. Emma couldn't help but replay the events from the park in her mind. She had always thought of herself as practical, as someone who stuck to her routines and followed the path that life had laid out for her. But when the billionaire had stepped into her life with nothing but a smile and a casual offer, it felt like a page from a different kind of story. She glanced at the clock on the kitchen wall. It was nearly time to pick Jack up from school. Her thoughts were clouded with uncertainties. But the decision was clear. She had accepted his offer to meet. The words still felt foreign to her. But they were real. After dropping Jack off at his friend's house, Emma found herself standing in front of the cafe where she had agreed to meet him. Her heart beat a little faster than usual, and for a moment, she wondered if this was the right choice. But she pushed those thoughts aside. She was here now. She stepped inside, and there he was, his dark suit pressed perfectly, his posture relaxed yet commanding. He smiled when he saw her. But it wasn't an arrogant smile. It was the kind of smile that made her feel seen, as if he wasn't just looking at her, but noticing everything about her, even the smallest details. She couldn't help but feel a little disoriented by it. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, his voice calm but filled with an unspoken promise. Emma nodded, taking a seat across from him. She had expected to be nervous. But she wasn't. Maybe it was his demeanor, or perhaps the simple fact that he wasn't rushing her into anything. They ordered their drinks in silence, the words they spoke soft but meaningful. She felt herself drawn into his presence. But she held onto the small tether of her reality. Her son, her job, her life. "Tell me about your work," he said after a pause, breaking the silence. Emma hesitated for a moment before answering. "I manage a small nonprofit. We provide resources for families in need." He nodded thoughtfully. "That's admirable," he said, his tone sincere. "But I get the feeling you want more than just to keep things running." You want to make a difference, don't you? Emma didn't answer immediately. She had always wanted to do more. Her work with the nonprofit was fulfilling, but she had always hoped for an opportunity to have a bigger impact. I do, she said finally, her voice steady but filled with an undercurrent of longing. I want to do something that matters. Something that can change lives. His eyes softened as if he understood more than he was letting on. And what if I could help you do that? What if I could help you make that difference? Her heart skipped a beat. The offer wasn't just about the money. It was about the possibilities, the potential for something she had only dreamed about. She took a deep breath and locked eyes with him, feeling the weight of the moment. I don't know what to say, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. He smiled again, leaning forward slightly. Say yes, he said softly. Say yes, and I'll help you create the life you've always wanted. No strings attached. Emma felt a rush of emotions, excitement, fear, hope. The realization that this moment, this choice, could alter the course of her life forever. She looked at him for a long time, her mind racing. But finally she nodded. Yes, she said, her voice steady now. I'll do it. In that instant, everything felt different. There was a new path ahead. It was one she never expected to take. But maybe, just maybe, this was the chance she had been waiting for all along. Emma sat at her kitchen table, her fingers wrapped around a warm mug of coffee as she gazed out the window. The soft morning light filtered through the trees, casting shadows on the lawn. For a moment, she allowed herself to breathe deeply, relishing in the quiet that came before the day fully began. She had always been a planner, someone who knew what to expect, who thrived on routine. But in the past few days, her life had taken a turn she hadn't seen coming. Her thoughts drifted back to the conversation she had with Harrison 2 days ago. His offer still lingered in her mind, like a promise hanging in the air, waiting to be fulfilled. He hadn't pressured her. But the way he'd spoken, so calm, so certain, had made her question everything she thought she knew. Think about it, he'd said with that steady gaze of his. You don't have to say yes right now, but I'm offering you the chance to build something bigger. A chance to make a difference, Emma. Not just for you, but for your son too. She hadn't realized just how tired she was of her small, predictable world until those words had been spoken. Her life had revolved around taking care of Jack, managing her nonprofit, keeping everything running smoothly. It was enough, she thought. It should have been enough. But there was a restlessness inside her, something that had been building for years, but had remained buried beneath the weight of daily responsibilities. She hadn't had time to think about her own dreams, her own desires. She was too busy with everyone else's. Now it was as though Harrison had offered her the key to a door she hadn't even known existed. A door that could open to something beyond her current reality. But was she ready? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps coming down the hallway. Jack, her 8-year-old son, appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. He was still wearing his pajamas, his messy hair sticking up in all directions. Morning, Mom, he mumbled, smiling sleepily as he walked toward the kitchen table. Morning, sweetie, Emma said, her heart warming at the sight of him. She had always made sure to put him first, even when it meant sacrificing her own desires. Jack climbed into the chair across from her. She handed him a bowl of cereal. For a moment she just watched him, his innocence and joy a reminder of why she worked so hard every day. But now as she looked at him, something stirred deep inside her. Jack deserved more than the life she had created for them. He deserved the chance to see his mother take a leap, to show him that it was okay to chase after your dreams, no matter how far they seemed. She wasn't just a mom. She was a person with aspirations of her own. She wanted Jack to see that it was possible to reach for something greater. Taking a deep breath, Emma made a decision. I'm going to meet him, she whispered, more to herself than to Jack. He looked up, his mouth full of cereal, and grinned. Meet who? Harrison, Emma replied, smiling back at him. And maybe, just maybe, he's offering me a chance at something amazing. Jack's eyes widened. Are you going to say yes? She paused for a moment, considering her words carefully. I think so, she said softly. And for the first time in a long time, Emma felt a flicker of excitement, of hope in her heart. Maybe this was the beginning of something new, something beautiful. She wasn't sure yet, but she was ready to find out. Emma arrived 10 minutes early, and still, it felt like she was already late for something she couldn't fully define. The building stood tall in front of her, all glass and steel, reflecting a version of the city she had never been part of. She adjusted the sleeve of her simple blouse, suddenly aware of how different she might look walking into a place like this. Not unworthy, just unfamiliar. The revolving doors moved steadily as people in tailored suits stepped in and out without hesitation. Emma paused for half a second, then stepped forward, letting the momentum carry her inside. The lobby was quiet in a way that felt expensive. Polished floors, soft lighting, conversations that stayed low and controlled. She approached the front desk, gave her name, and within seconds, someone was guiding her toward a private elevator. It all moved too smoothly, too easily, as if she had stepped into a life that had been waiting for her without asking who she used to be. When the elevator doors opened, Nathan was already there. He was not behind a desk. He was standing near the window just like she had imagined. The city stretched out behind him. He turned when he heard her steps, and for a moment, there was no distance in his expression, only recognition. "You came," he said quietly. Emma nodded, her voice steady even if her heartbeat was not. "I said I would." He gestured toward a small seating area instead of a formal office space. That mattered more than she expected. It didn't feel like an interview. It felt like a conversation he had already decided was important. They sat across from each other, a low table between them, nothing else creating distance. Nathan didn't begin with numbers or expectations. He watched her for a moment, as if measuring something beyond her resume. "Tell me what you would do," he said. Emma blinked slightly. "With what?" she asked. "With the chance you said you wanted," he replied. "To make a difference." The question settled between them, heavier than any formal offer. Emma exhaled slowly, her hands resting together in her lap. This was not about impressing him. She knew that instinctively. So she answered honestly. "I would build something that doesn't disappear when funding does," she said. "Something that teaches people how to stand on their own. Not just receive help, but keep it going." Nathan's eyes shifted, not in surprise, but in quiet approval. "And if it fails?" he asked. Emma held his gaze. "Then it fails honestly," she said. "But at least it would have been real." Silence followed, but it was not uncomfortable. It felt like something settling into place. Nathan leaned back slightly, his posture relaxed in a way that didn't match the reputation Emma had heard about him. "Do you know why I stopped that day in the park?" he asked. Emma shook her head. "Because you gave something away when you didn't have enough," he said. "Most people wait until they've more. You did not." Emma looked down for a brief moment, then back up. "I didn't think about it," she admitted. "Exactly," Nathan replied. He reached for a folder on the table and slid it toward her. It was not thick, not overwhelming, just enough to matter. "This isn't charity," he said. "And it isn't a favor. This is a position, a program I want built the right way. And I think you're the only one who would refuse to do it wrong." Emma didn't open the folder right away. She looked at him instead. Not at the suit, not at the office, just at him. "Why me?" she asked quietly. Nathan didn't hesitate this time. "Because you didn't need to be seen to do the right thing," he said. The answer stayed with her longer than she expected. Emma finally placed her hand on the folder, not opening it yet, but not pulling away either. This was not the moment her life changed completely. Not yet, but it was the moment she realized it could. Emma sat in the quiet coffee shop, the low hum of casual conversations blending with the comforting clink of coffee cups. She stirred her latte absent-mindedly, watching the steam curl up into the cool air. The day had unfolded in a blur of meetings, and yet, this moment felt like a strange calm amidst the chaos. Nathan's words from earlier echoed in her mind. "It's not charity. It's a chance to build something real." She wasn't sure why that simple sentence felt so heavy. Maybe it was the weight of his confidence in her. Or perhaps the overwhelming realization that her life was shifting in ways she couldn't control. The bell above the door chimed, and Emma looked up, her thoughts momentarily interrupted. A man in a sharp suit stepped inside, his confident stride unmistakable even from across the room. "Nathan." She had expected to see him at the office or a formal setting, not here, not like this. But as he walked toward her table, his expression softened. The walls he wore so easily in his office were gone, replaced by something more genuine. "You're early," she said, offering him a small smile as he sat down across from her. "Couldn't wait to see the place," he replied with a smile of his own, his eyes glinting with something unreadable. "And to see how you've been handling all of this." Emma gave a shrug. "It's a lot, but I'm learning. The idea of it all is starting to feel real. Like it could actually work." Nathan leaned forward, his hands resting on the table, his gaze intense yet calm. "You know, I've worked with plenty of people who talk about making a difference, but they rarely mean it. They want the results without the real work. You're not like them." The compliment hung in the air between them, and Emma found herself strangely unsettled by it. She had always been the quiet one, the one who kept her head down and did the work, not expecting praise. Yet here he was, seeing something in her that she hadn't even seen in herself. It made her uneasy, but at the same time it felt strangely empowering. "I'm just doing what I can," she said, her voice softer than she meant it to be. "I'm not looking for accolades. I want to build something lasting, something that actually helps." Nathan's lips curved into a small knowing smile. "You've got the right idea. But do you ever stop and think about what happens next? What happens when you've built what you want, and it's time to let it grow on its own?" Emma paused, the question catching her off guard. She hadn't really thought about it. She was so focused on the next step, on making sure everything was done the right way. But Nathan was right. There would come a time when she'd have to step back, when her creation would have to stand on its own. "I guess I've been so focused on getting there that I haven't really considered that," she admitted. "But I suppose it's a good question." Nathan nodded slowly, as if this moment, this conversation, was a pivotal point in something much bigger. "It's not just about building, Emma. It's about knowing when to step aside and trust what you've built." His voice softened, his gaze steady. "You'll have to trust yourself too." Emma exhaled slowly, her mind racing with possibilities, uncertainties, and hopes. She hadn't expected to find herself here, this close to a man who seemed to understand the weight of ambition, the toll it took on someone. But now she found herself wondering if trusting him was as important as trusting herself. Emma didn't realize how much had changed until the moment something pushed back. It happened 3 days later, in a conference room filled with people who had built their entire careers inside the kind of world she had just stepped into. The room was bright, the glass walls reflecting every movement, every glance, every hesitation. She stood at the far end of the table, a tablet in her hands, her notes prepared, her thoughts clear. But the atmosphere was different today. It was not quiet curiosity anymore. It was evaluation. A man across the table leaned back in his chair, his expression measured but unmistakably skeptical. "So you're the one leading this initiative," he said. His tone was polite, but it carried an edge that didn't need to be loud to be heard. Emma held her posture, steady but aware. "Yes," she replied. "I am." The man nodded slowly, as if acknowledging the answer but not accepting it. "With respect," he continued, "your background isn't exactly aligned with the scale of what we're discussing. This program will require significant oversight, strategy, and global coordination. It isn't community volunteering." The words were clean, controlled, but they landed harder than anything said so far. Around the table a few eyes shifted, some neutral, some curious, some already deciding. Emma felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the voice that used to tell her to step back, to stay quiet, to not risk being wrong. For a brief second she almost listened. Almost. Then she remembered the park. The boy. The moment she didn't think, she just acted. She placed the tablet down slowly, not as a gesture of surrender, but as a decision to speak without hiding behind prepared lines. "You are right," she said calmly. The man across from her seemed slightly surprised by the agreement. Emma continued before he could respond. "I haven't spent my life in rooms like this. I haven't led projects with budgets that look like numbers most people can't even imagine." She paused just enough to let the truth settle. Then she looked directly at him. "But I've spent years understanding what happens when systems fail people," she said. "I have seen what doesn't work. I've lived inside the gaps that programs like this are supposed to fill. The room grew quieter. Not tense. Focused. So no, she added softly. I am not here because I've done this before. I'm here because I understand what happens when it's done wrong. There was no rise in her voice. No need for it. The weight of her words came from something deeper than authority. Came from experience. The man across from her straightened slightly, his expression no longer dismissive, but reconsidering. At the far end of the room, Nathan hadn't said a single word. He hadn't interrupted. He hadn't defended her. But his presence was steady, his gaze fixed on Emma with a quiet intensity that didn't need explanation. He hadn't brought her here to protect her. He had brought her here to see if she would stand, and she did. The silence that followed was different now. It was no longer about doubt. It was about recognition. Emma picked up her tablet again, but her hands felt lighter this time. Not because the room had changed, but because she had. She didn't need to prove she belonged. She only needed to show why she was there. And for the first time since stepping into this world, she was not trying to catch up to it. She was reshaping it in her own way. The next few weeks passed in a blur of meetings, decisions, and unexpected moments of self-discovery. Emma had found her footing in the new world she had been thrust into. She was learning how to balance the demanding pace of her job with the nurturing side of herself that she had kept close for so long. At home, her son was flourishing. The stress she had once carried now felt more like a distant memory, something she could look back on with a sense of gratitude. But even as things seemed to settle, there was an undercurrent of change that was impossible to ignore. One evening, after a long day of strategizing at work, Emma sat on the edge of her bed, glancing over her phone. Her son Tommy was asleep in the next room. The apartment was quiet. She picked up a message from Nathan. Can we talk? It read. It had been a few days since they'd last spoken in any meaningful way. He had been busy with his own responsibilities, but Emma had sensed a subtle distance. She typed back, of course. What's on your mind? Minutes later, her phone rang. She answered quickly. Hey Nathan. I've been thinking, he started, his voice softer than usual, about how much you've changed in such a short time. I've seen you grow in ways I didn't expect. Emma could feel the weight of his words, but she wasn't sure how to respond. I'm just doing what I've to do. I didn't want to fall behind. I didn't want Tommy to grow up thinking I was stuck in something I couldn't get out of. Nathan was quiet for a moment, the silence pressing in. I know, he said, and I admire you for it. But I also know you've been carrying more than you realize. I don't want you to have to carry it all by yourself anymore. Emma swallowed hard. She hadn't expected those words, not in the way they landed. She had been so focused on her own transformation that she hadn't truly understood how much Nathan had been watching, how much he cared. I don't know if I can let anyone in, Nathan, she admitted quietly. I don't know how to lean on someone else. Not after everything. You don't have to do it alone, he said softly, his tone both reassuring and vulnerable. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Emma felt a swell of emotion she hadn't been ready for. The words felt like a promise, but they also felt like an invitation, one she wasn't sure she could take. I want to believe that, she whispered, but I need to figure out who I'm in this new life before I let anyone else in. Nathan's response was gentle, understanding. Take your time, Emma. But remember, you don't have to figure it all out alone. I'm here for you whenever you're ready. The conversation ended, and Emma lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. She wasn't sure if she was ready to fully embrace Nathan's offer, but the thought of it lingered in her mind. Maybe there was a part of her that could trust again, a part that was ready to let someone else in. The journey was still unfolding, but she was no longer walking it alone. As she closed her eyes, Emma felt something she hadn't felt in years, hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she could let go of the past and step into the future with someone by her side. Emma didn't realize when the fear left her. It didn't happen all at once. It slipped away quietly, somewhere between long nights of planning and small mornings with her son that no longer felt heavy. The apartment was still the same. The kitchen table still held the same worn edges. But something inside her had shifted. She was no longer holding her breath between decisions. She was living inside them. One afternoon, weeks after that call, Emma stood in front of a group of community leaders in a modest recreation center on the edge of the city. It was not a polished boardroom. It was not filled with executives. But it was exactly where her program had begun to take shape. Real people. Real stories. Real needs. She spoke without notes, her voice steady, her words grounded in everything she had lived through. When she finished, the room didn't erupt into applause. It did something more meaningful. It nodded. It understood. That was enough. Outside, the air was crisp, the sky stretching wide above her as she stepped down the front steps. Nathan was there, leaning against his car, not in a suit this time, but in something simpler. Something closer to who he had been before the world expected him to be more. He straightened when he saw her, but he didn't move toward her right away. He waited. Emma walked toward him slowly, the space between them filled with everything that had changed since the day in the park. "You didn't tell me you would be here," she said, her voice calm but softer than usual. Nathan gave a small smile. "I didn't want to turn it into something else," he replied. "This was yours." Emma studied him for a moment, then nodded. "It is," she said. There was no hesitation in it anymore. No doubt. Just truth. They stood there in a quiet pause that didn't feel unfinished. It felt earned. Nathan looked at her, not with admiration alone, but with something deeper. Something that had grown without either of them forcing it. "You built it," he said quietly. Emma shook her head once, a faint smile touching her lips. "I started it," she replied. "The people built it." Nathan exhaled softly, as if that answer mattered more than anything else she could have said. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The city moved around them, distant but present, like a reminder that life didn't stop for moments like this. But somehow this one held. Emma looked at him again, this time without the wall she had carried for so long. "You were right," she said. Nathan raised an eyebrow slightly. "About what?" Emma met his gaze, steady and clear. "I didn't need to be saved," she said. "I needed to be seen." The words settled between them, simple and undeniable. Nathan didn't rush to respond. When he did, his voice was quieter than it had ever been. "And you reminded me that having everything doesn't mean anything if you don't feel it," he said. Emma let out a small breath, something between a laugh and relief. It was not a dramatic moment. There were no grand gestures. Just two people standing at the intersection of who they had been and who they had become. Jack's voice called out from behind her, running down the steps with the kind of energy only a child could carry. Emma turned instinctively, her face lighting up in a way that had never changed. Nathan watched that, not interrupting, not stepping in, just understanding. As Emma took her son's hand and looked back at him, there was no question left in her expression, only possibility. And this time it was not about a life being changed in a single moment. It was about a life being chosen, one quiet, steady decision at a time.